What is going on, everyone, and welcome to my Templar healer build. So with the upcoming one Tamriel expansion coming out in October, I know there's going to be either a lot of new players or a lot of people returning to the game since, I don't know, whenever you quit. So, Templars are usually known for being the most versatile classes. You can be DPS, heals, or even a tank. I've even seen people just do a mix of both. However, this build I'm going to be showing you is primarily going to be heals. And it's going to be used for pretty much everything, PvP and PvE. However, it's more like spec for PvE dungeons and trials and whatnot. So keep in mind this is a little bit later in the game, but everything, I mean, you can technically get most of this stuff at level 1 or at least level 10 minimum. But it's easier to get it later on. Anyway, so this is going to be more of a heal build and less of a DPS. I know most people have a mix of both. Technically, this one does too. However, it's going to be more based on people's survivability. As you're a healer, your job is to keep people alive at all costs over damage. And I know there's a billion different ways to mix and match, but this is what I found worked for me. And also, not like one of those builds you see where people have 100% top tier items that you only get from certain trials and whatnot. Technically, every item here can be bought with like gold, so you don't actually have to do the dungeons. Well, I mean, you save money if you do it, but still, technically everything is buyable, not trial items where you can only get it by running the dungeon. So let's start off with the items, and then we'll be doing the skills. I'll show you all the replacements and just list some other stuff, just in case you're like mid-tier or whatever. Then we'll be going over champion points, and I'll go over pretty much everything else. So, yeah, let's take a quick look at the items first, just to get that out of the way. So, the first set we're going to be using is the Kagrenac's Hope. We're using a 5-piece one of this, the chest, shoes, pants, gloves, and the hat. So the reason why we use this one is pretty much for the everything. You get the most spell damage with the 5-piece, and obviously you get more magic and recovery, which is pretty important as a healer. So keep that in mind. Everything we're going to be using is divines. That's the trait. Now we'll get to that a little bit later, but divines in general is usually the #1 choice for pretty much everything, unless you're doing something very specific like tanking, where you might want sturdy or something. But just in general, divines is like top tier. Doesn't matter what you're doing, DPS, heals, whatever. Most people choose divines. That's why it's also kind of more expensive. But this Kagrenac set is completely craftable. The way you get it is by doing the Fighter's Guild storyline. So I think midway is when you go to a certain area. I'm going to try to say this without spoiling, just in case I know some of you may or may not have done it. So, Fighters Guild, midway, you unlock this new area. You'll know what it is because you'll be there like once, and then you'll never go there again unless you want to craft the item. So, yeah, everything we're going to have is pretty much magic, and we occasionally have some health just because I'll go over that a little bit later. But for the most part, you want all magic enchantments and then health if you actually need it. So, Kagrenac's Hope, you get resources, health, magic, everything important, spell damage, and decreases the time to resurrect an ally. And when they die, you get more magic. Generally, if you're playing with good people, you won't need to be reviving them, especially if you're a good healer. They won't be dying, unless, keep in mind, you can't heal stupidity. And if someone stands in fire for too long and they die, they're probably going to blame you, but it's actually not your fault. So, overall, this is a pretty good set. This is a fully craftable, and the replacements, I'll list them right after I explain everything. So my next 5-piece set I'll be explaining is the Worm set. Now, you can get this in the Maw of Lorcage. That is a endgame trial. Technically, you can get it at level 10 by doing mini runs with other people, and it pretty much just scales to your level based on whenever you run it. So it's kind of expensive if you buy it, but the price has been going down significantly, and by the time in like a month from now, the price is probably going to be either really cheaper or you're going to have to run it yourself. So, yeah, the pieces we're running for the worm are shoulders, belt, and jewelry. Now, keep in mind, jewelry is the most expensive thing in the entire game. Really, for everything, doesn't matter what you're doing, DPS, heals, tanking, jewelry is the most expensive. So, yeah, we have the necklace, 2 rings of the worm, and the enchantments I put for all of these is spell damage, because spell damage and magic is what base your heals off of, or your heals are based off of your spell damage and magic in general. So more spell damage and more magic equals higher heals, and in general. So the reason why we use the worm set is mostly for the spell damage, the magic, and the 5-piece reduces the magic cost for up to 12 people by 5%. Now, if you want to run 12, it's usually for a trial, which is the late game stuff. But if you're just doing a dungeon for 4 people, including yourself, everyone just gets a reduced mana cost, which is generally good. So, with that said, I use 2 Torug pack swords, and with precise traits, simply because you want more. I've seen people use like Inferno staffs, generally dual wielding. You get double the damage if you dual wield. That makes sense. So once again, precise, and with double of that, you get more heals. So you also get dual wield abilities instead of having a staff of one. So it's a little bit more expensive to craft out fully legendary weapons, but you get 2 different enchantments instead of 1. Now, technically, I'm just using it for heals, but I mean, if you want to do damage, why not? It doesn't hurt. And hold on, let me charge this real quick. Our staff, it doesn't really matter what you use. If you can get a Maelstrom or like a Dragonstar Arena Master Weapon, obviously that would be good, because this is only a 1-piece thing. Now, Torug's pack, we're only using it for the one thing, so the set itself doesn't really matter. So overall, that's what I'm using. Kagrenac's Hope, Worm, Torug's pack, and that's it. So a few replacements I would do in case you don't have any, or just you want to craft things easier. Giuliano set is another fully magic one and recovery. It doesn't have the spell damage, but it has more recovery and magic, so higher magic. The top end game one you could get is the spell power here. You get that from White Gold Tower, which is a dungeon, a DLC dungeon from the Imperial City. Now, I do have some pieces of it, but they're not in divines, so generally, if it's not divines, use something else. And that's just the general rule of what I do. So, overall, Kagrenac's Hope is good. Twiceborn Star might work, but it's not the best because you don't get spell power or anything. But you would be able to get 2 Mundus stones, which is also fine. So, with that said, we covered pretty much all of the items. I've given some replacements. And assuming you're over 50 or at least champion point 10 or higher, everything should be good to go. Alright, so let's talk about our spell damage, criticals, and magic. Don't worry about the weapons stuff. You're a healer. Your goal is to be healing, not doing damage. I mean, it helps, but no, it's not the highest priority. So, health. If you're doing dungeons in general, dungeons or trials, you want to stay above 18,000 health, or 17 if you're good at it, 18 if you want an extra little bit of room in case something might happen. 17 is like breaking the very minimum you should have. 18,000 is playing it safe a little bit. And magic, I would say over 35,000 is good. Anything above that is fantastic. And you have potions and stuff to boost it. So spell critical is also very important because it bases your heals just like a weapon critical doing damage. So let's say you heal for 10,000. If you hit expel critical, you heal for like 20,000 or something. So it works the same way, just in heals. And then spell damage, magic increases your heals. Alright, so let's talk about our abilities now. So number 2 is our heal bar, and then number 1 is our off heals and dots, or damage over time, if you will, and slight damage. So let's start off with our heal bar. The first thing we're going to be looking at is in our restoration staff. I guarantee you every single healer video or healer you see in game is going to be using some of these skills. Now our first one we have is rapid regeneration. Now what this does is essentially if you cast it, wait, hold on. Oh, you can't do it now. There has to be people around. But if you cast it, you share like heal ticks with other people near you, and you heal them for about 24,000 over 16 seconds. The other morph of this is called mutagen. Essentially, you heal a little bit less over 20 seconds. However, if they go below, let's say like 30%, the mutagen will pop and give them another 8,000 extra health. I've actually tested both of them. And honestly, they're both good abilities, but it really depends on who you play with and what you do. So like if you're playing with random people who may or may not be good at the game, to be quite honest, mutagen might be a little bit better. If you are playing with good people, like good friends, and everyone's communicating and stuff, rapid regen, no one really dies, just keep them at full health at all times and you're good to go. So quite honestly, both morphs are good, but I set this for rapid regen because I play with good people, and for the most part they know what they're doing, so I don't really have to worry about them dying as often. Alright, so as I was saying before I got interrupted, sorry about the edit. Yeah, so we went over rapid regen, and then we're going over our healing spring. So I have an add-on that shows me how much everything ticks for. So essentially, if you're doing rapid regen, it looks like this. And then for 2 people, it just heals them, so you don't have to be too close to them. And then healing springs is an AoE effect. You just toss down like that, and then it heals them. So you can see the numbers on the side. They're kind of small. So if they're standing in your healing springs, they're taking heals, along with if you're like casting rapid regen, it gives you more heals. So staying at full health is generally good, yeah? And then our third ability is Breath of Life. This is one of the most important Templar skills if you are a healer, or just in general. But magic-based builds use Breath of Life just because it heals for a lot. So take a look at the numbers on the screen. I would say like right about here. Now, when I heal someone, that was their normal hit for 23. And then, well, that was actually a critical, 13,000, 14,000, and then criticals are 24,000. So remember how I said staying above 18,000 health is good? So one Breath of Life essentially heals them for like 80%, and then if you crit, you heal them for full. Unless they're a tank with like 40,000 health, then you might need 2 of them. But overall, you should be good to go. So Breath of Life is very important. It's one of the highest, like, if there's anything you have on your heal bar, it's, as a Templar, it's Breath of Life. And then Combat Prayer. This is essentially your AoE heal spell. And what it does is when you cast it down, it gives your allies, like every single person standing in the line, instant health and like extra damage by 8%. So this is what it looks like. With the guy standing right here, if I were to cast out Combat Prayer, you see the line going in a straight line like that? Everyone who stands in front of that line gets the Combat Prayer buff. You can look right here as well. That's the buff timer. And essentially your health goes up. Or not your health. Your damage goes up and you get instant regen. So especially if you're doing a dungeon or a raid with heavy, you have to do heavy heals for everyone. Honestly, you'd be using all your skills, but then Combat Prayer is one of those ones where you need emergency heals, and you're doing like bosses and stuff. So, for the most part, 1 and 2 is for your majority of things. Combat prayer is for heavy heals and emergency things because it costs a lot of mana to cast. However, it does a lot of instant regen as well. So like your Breath of Life and your Combat Prayer shouldn't be spammed since they cost the most, while like Rapid Regen is and this one costs significantly less. And Inner Light is your ability that gives you more magic and increases your spell rating. So essentially your critical is higher and you get more max regen. So my ultimate is Aggressive Horn. Now technically this one is under the Alliance War, which is PvP. Now I understand not everyone has Aggressive Horn or the War Horn just because not everyone is interested in PvP. So in other words, what I would use instead if you don't have it is Meteor. If you have the passive with your Meteor, you essentially gain more max magic for every Mage's Guild slotted. So like 2% for each one. Then we have Inner Light, and then if we had Meteor or Shooting Star, that's a morph version, you'd get an additional 4%. So if you don't have Meteor, honestly, just look up a guide somewhere, look for where all the sky or lore books are, collect them. It's a very good skill. So if you are getting them and you don't have it at the moment, another thing you could look out for is Solar Prison. If you don't have this unlocked by the time you're level 50, I really don't know what you're doing with your life. But essentially what this ability does is you call down an AoE. This is kind of like a defensive skill. You do damage to your enemies, and your allies can activate a synergy, dealing more damage. So damage is good. So priorities, I would probably use Warhorn. If you max out your PvP or Alliance War, you could also use Barrier. Honestly, if you're a Templar healer, you're probably a good healer. Like, you have a lot of heals that you won't really need to have a shield. That's why the Horn gives your allies more critical chance and just more health in general. Health, magic, stamina, all the stats are boosted, including yours. So you usually call down the Horn before bosses, and it lasts for like 30 seconds while you heal through it. So once again, just in case you didn't get it, Horn is one of the top tier ones. If you don't have that, you'd go Mage's Guild to get your Meteor, because not only does it do damage, you get a 4% or 2% max magic or magic bonus, and if you're using Inner Light, it'll be 4%, so like 1, 2. And if you don't have that, then just choose one of your class ones. Solar Prison would be a good one. And yeah, so let's go over our second bar. Now this one is our dot bar. Dot stands for damage over time, and sort of like slight DPS heals. So if you have to have Inner Light on both bars to get the effect, and if you only have it on one bar and you switch bars, the effect goes away. So that's why we have it on both of them. You don't have to cast it twice, you just have to have it on both bars. Alright, so let's go with everything else in order. Our Blazing Spears goes under Spears. Essentially, why do you have this? When you toss it down, your allies, like, they regain stamina, and essentially it slows an enemy down. So if you toss this down, it has an AoE effect like that. You toss it, your allies can pick up a spear, regaining more stamina. It's especially good for your tank, just because you need stamina to block and whatnot. So having more resources for them not dying is generally a good thing. So that's why you have that. The Luminous Shards is the other morph for that ability. It's also pretty good, but Blazing Spears essentially stuns your enemy. Now the difference between Luminous and Blazing is the other one, like, it kind of like, it's not stun, it does something else. I had it in the top of my head and just kind of blanked out, but it disorients an enemy, while this one stuns an enemy. So our second ability is our Radiant Oppression. And for the past 2 years of this game, this ability is broken good. It just like fucking beam just shoots out, and if your enemies are under 20%, or like 30%, like something, you pretty much just instant kill them. And then along with all your passives here, you're essentially
It's here.
doing more damage than most DPS people do, believe it or not. This is a really strong DPS ability. Alright, next. Every Templar should have this if you're using magic. It's just that good. Your DPS will significantly show on counters and whatnot. So next on your bar is Repentance. I always say this in every single video I do. Repentance is a very important skill. What it does is when there are dead bodies on the ground from what you killed, this is a no-cost ability that gives you more resources. So every Templar should use this. I don't care what you do, what role you play. Repentance is that important. It's really good. So we have this one. It regains health and stamina for the number of dead bodies on the ground. So if there's one, you get like 10% or something like that. And Repentance is good. So the next one on our slot is kind of like your wild card. There's a lot of options depending on what you want to do. Since this is your dot bar or damage bar, whatever you want to call it, you can switch this one out for whatever. I use Extended Ritual because when I do trials, it looks like this. You cast it down. You see that? The whole circle all around me. That's the radius of everything around me. Cast it again. That's a huge radius, especially if there's like 12 people you have to heal in a group. Now, what this does is essentially removes harmful effects, poison, burn, etc. And then if your allies are like running out of health, they can like call into synergy and then gain an additional 8,000 health. So essentially more heals. Now if you're going for more damage, you could use Channeled Focus as well. Now Channeled Focus increases your resistances. It also increases your heals. However, let's say if I put this on right here, instead of the huge radius, it's like this one. It's a smaller radius where everyone can stand in it, but it doesn't last as long either. But you heal for a lot higher. So let me just, if I have this up and I'm healing, you can see the numbers. So yeah, other than that, if you do PvP, you can always put Magicka Detonation on there as well. That is more of a damage ability. But for the most part, depends on what you do. If you're using this more for PvP, Magicka Detonation might be good. But if you're doing this for dungeons and trials, to be quite honest, Channeled Focus and Extended Rituals are very good choices. I just use Extended Ritual just because it has a bigger like radius and then it heals more people. So you're a healer, that's your job. And then on your second bar, I just have Meteor because there's no point in having the same ultimate on two bars. So on this one, I just have more magic. And if I'm feeling like I need more damage on this one, I'll just cast down a Meteor. If my team needs more health, you cast down your Horn. And it really just depends on the situation, but don't have two ults on the same bar or on the same thing. So just have a little bit of variety. Okay, so let's see what's next. Champion points. As of right now, when I uploaded this video, the cap is 531 champion points. If you're watching this like 2 years from now, the build is probably still going to be good. However, the cap for champion points is probably going to be like 800 or something. So there are a lot of different ways to build it, so don't take this like you have to have everything perfectly. This is just how I built it, and it works for me. So what I did was split these in half. Essentially, this is more resistances. I kind of split this up evenly, just because it reduces damage by pretty much everything, so you want these even. These are the two most important ones. The thick skin one is not as important. You could switch it out into like Spell Shield or something for the roll, dodge, more resistance. But what I do is trials for the most part, and there's a lot of AoE effects like fire floors, and I don't know, there's a lot of poison on the ground. So I want to reduce my damage over time just so I could heal through things a little bit better. There are always better choices depending on what you're doing. However, these are the two most important: Elemental Defender and Hardy. Even if you have, like, let's say 20 points or 20 champion points, put 10 and 10 into this. Even it out. These are very important. Alright, so next, Tower, or the green. We'll just call it red, blue, green, just to make things easier. And what I did between these two is I evened it out. So the Magician reduces the magic cost of spells, and this one increases your recovery of magic. So honestly, these are just the two best ones for a healer in your entire tree. So you want it. That's really as simple as that. This one and this one. There's nothing else. Don't put into anything else if you're a healer. It's really simple. And then this one is the thing where it gets kind of tricky, because the way I built this is full heals, and that's your job, especially if you're doing heavy heals in trials. So the effectiveness of healing done by 25%, you want to max this one out 100%. This is your highest priority. And now this is where things start splitting off depending on how you build your character. If you want to do slightly more damage but less healing, you would put more into your magic damage and all of this. Well, this one doesn't matter. Don't put anything in here. But Elemental Expert, if you want to do more damage, you put it into here. Or if you want to split it. But I put it into spell criticals because if you hit a critical, you double your healing. So this character is more built just for keeping people alive, less damage. So that's why all heals, all spell crit heals, and it does damage if you hit crits, but that's always good. But I use it for heals priority. If I were to continue putting points into here, because I have, I don't know, another 80 to split, so I would just put more into this one. But if I were you and you're doing more damage, you need more damage, put into Elemental Expert. For green ones, until we get capped, we're going to be splitting them evenly into Magician and Arcanist. And then for the rest of this, you're going to be splitting it into Elemental Defender and Hardy. So that's pretty much the entire build in detail. Let's see, what other things you could use if you want more damage instead of the Kagrenacs. This is one of the late game sets you're going to have to do in trials. I don't expect anyone to ever have this unless you're like a late game player just doing end game stuff. Infallible Aether, it's trial sets, more damage, and this is especially the 3-piece. Increases your attacks in dungeons and trials. So if you're PvP, don't use it. It's not good. Only if you're doing PvE content. So PvP has other stuff you can use. Spell Power Cure, generally good. And yeah. So let's see. As for potions, there's a Spell Power Potion. I don't think I have it. Oh yeah, food. We'll just go over food real quick. I use this one. Most people use blue foods instead of purple. Simply because purple is a tri-stat and blue is a bi-stat, or a 2. So essentially, if you use a 3-food purple, you gain about 4,000 of health, magic, and stamina. However, if you use a blue one, you get 5,000 in health and magicka. Well, honestly, you can make different foods in different combinations, but the resources you want are health and magicka. Those are the highest priority things you want. So health, magicka, have food at all times. If someone tells you food is not important in a game, they're lying, they're stupid, they're probably bad at the game. Having increased magicka and health keeps you from dying, and let's say, see, you just shoot up another like 7,000 or like 6,000 health, and I've never heard anyone tell me that that's not good if you don't use food. So if someone tells you having less resources is good, you should probably just leave the party and quit. Don't play with them. They're probably bad at the game. And yeah, so as for potions, to be honest, it doesn't really matter what you do. If you have a lot of extra money, there are these things called the tri-stat, like healing, critical, and spell damage ones. I don't use it because, quite honestly, it's expensive and things are only getting more expensive. So having just normal health and magic potions is fine. If you have extra money for some reason and you're fully legendaried out gear and you really have nothing else to get, one, I don't even know why you're watching this video. You're already good at this game. And two, I guess you should probably do something else. So for the most part, if you're just running normal stuff, just use regular stat potions. It's not going to break your bank. You can find them everywhere. And yeah, so I guess as a recap of everything we've learned in this build: 1, mundus stones, your traits. Divines is the most important, and magic and health are important. Oh yeah, one thing I forgot to mention over here is your mundus stone. Now, the ritual increases your healing, and as a healer, increased healing is good. So another thing you could use is the thief, which is increasing your spell critical. So essentially you're doubling it. Technically I haven't done min-maxing for everything. I honestly probably am not going to either. A lot of people use it because if you want more spell critical, you also heal higher. But it really is up to you. The increased healing is an overall heal bonus, while the other one is if you hit a crit, you would heal higher. So it really just depends if you want overall higher or crit higher. And then there's one that increases spell damage. I really haven't tested that one as much, but spell damage and healing is fine. But generally, if you just want to be safe, go with the ritual. It increases your overall healing. You can't go wrong with that. As for attributes, if you're somehow struggling to get at least 17,000 health, put more into health, at least 10 points. If you're doing fine, you can put more into magic. I just put 64 into magic just to make everything easy. And to be honest, if you want, you could just change the enchantment of this and this, like 2 pieces randomly. It doesn't really matter. You change the enchantment. It's essentially like putting 10 into health or 9 into health. So whichever one is cheaper, I guess. So yeah. Overall, I think that covers just about everything, except one more thing. I guess I'll go over the rotation in your abilities. So let's see. I don't think it really matters. It mostly is situational. However, let's go over everything first. So if you're going into a fight or something, you'd want to toss down your spears first, just to get the extra damage, and then you swap your bar. And then before every fight, you want to heal or cast your rapid regen on everyone because it's a 16-second buff, I guess you can say. Or over the next 16 seconds, before a fight goes on, that's when you're going to be like healing. And then once the fight starts, wherever all your teammates are fighting, you drop your healing springs down. And if they're standing in it, they're going to be healed over time, along with your rapid regen. So essentially, they're getting about 7,000 health, give or take, depending on your level. 7,000 health a second, which is generally good. You won't need to cast any more. And then after that, so this is where things kind of split up. If your teammates are always at full health, you want to start doing as much DPS as possible. And if they go below, I would say 60%, then that's when you start healing again. So then, let's say they sink below 60% health. What do? If everything's fighting fine, you cast down your combat prayer. Assuming everyone is in your line, they'll be getting an attack bonus and healed for like an additional, I don't know, 10,000 or so, or more. And essentially, they should be at full health if you cast your spells correctly. And then Breath of Life is kind of your emergency spell. It's an expensive ability, but it's like, if you heal, they should be at 100%. For the most part, you want to keep this down at all times. Your extended ritual or channeled focus, it really doesn't matter what you're doing. Generally, it's good. And then when enemies die, you want a repentance. And then for your damage, you're going to be obviously radiant oppression, melee attacking, or just tossing down spears. So don't worry about damage too much. You do quite a bit of radiant oppression. To be honest, I've done more DPS than actual DPS characters just using this ability, and I can heal significantly better. But overall, your rotation, cast rapid regen before the fight starts, and then once the fight is starting, you toss down your healing springs to where your tank is, and make sure they're standing in it, gaining health at all times. Next thing I would do, toss down the spears, especially to your tank, because he's going to pick them up and get more stamina so you can tank longer. When ads die, repentance, make sure your extended ritual is up at all times. And then where it splits off is if everyone's at full health at all times, just keep radiant oppressioning. And then if your teammate is falling below 50 or 60%, depending on what's happening, you want to either combat prayer or breath of life. If they for some reason drop below like 20%, that you press breath of life immediately. That is your emergency spell. If everything is going fine, not too much damage is being taken, you toss down combat prayer so everyone gets more health. And then usually you want to toss down or use your aggressive horn, war horn, before the fight starts. And then if everything is going fine, shooting star, meteor. But yeah, overall, that has been the Templar healer build. It's pretty cool. If you want to watch more gameplay, you can check the link in the description to more dungeons and trials and stuff. I've actually healed pretty much everything. This is one of the higher tier heals, in my opinion. People just don't die unless they do dumb things. You can't heal stupidity. So if someone wants to stand in poison for like a minute and they die, that's their fault. And yeah, you can't do anything about it except try to make sure they don't die. But if they do, that's actually their fault. So overall, hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give it a quick thumbs up and let me know what you thought. And if you do happen to try this build, let me know what you think of it. So I honestly think this is very good, and I've been getting a lot of positive comments from dungeons I've been healing. So with that said, maybe I'll bring some more gameplay for this build soon. And I think I do have some videos. If you want to go watch that, once again, links in the description. So I've been talking for like 40 minutes straight. I will see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.